Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Well, this didn't age very well, now did it? This is one of the biggest differences between the new black media and the old, dead, desiccated husk of the old black media. The black community dropped all of the ally rhetoric a long time ago. And yet you got these old fools who work for these white media companies who are trying to figure out if they can get that old dead horse back on life support. They're trying to do CPR on this corpse. Well, as long as they've been at it, at this point it's not CPR anymore, it's necrophilia. Pro tip to the incompetent operative class over at the Rot. If you're going to call yourself trying to claim that we got allies, if you're going to have a picture of people holding up a reparations banner, you might want to make sure that at least one of them is one of these professed allies. I mean, if you're interested in having credibility. Because you got a headline claiming that Japanese Americans joined the struggle for black reparations, but then I'm looking to see where they're at. Can you go ahead and show me some photos? And it's just black folks out there by themselves. So this is not actually about who's for reparations. This is basically just another we need to cultivate some more allies puff piece. At no point does the Rot or any of the other old dead black media ask, well, what do Asian Americans think when it comes to the idea of justice? Here's the reason why I bring up the question. When Peter Liang was on trial, we saw that event united Asian Americans like nothing ever had before. You literally had Asian Americans holding hands across America. Didn't matter if it was New York or California, and we're talking about Asian ethnic groups who have long-standing, deep-rooted antagonism towards one another. Japanese Americans, Korean Americans, East Asians and Southeast Asians, who people like Bobby Lee calls jungle Asians. I mean, we're talking about some really bigoted stuff. And yet, when it came time to talk about Peter Liang, all of those differences fell away. It was no longer talking about Japanese Americans or Korean Americans or Vietnamese Americans or Hmong or what have you. It was just Asian. All these Asian groups came together. Why? Because somebody who everyone admitted was a murderer, was a killer. This guy was going on trial for it, and apparently there was this panic response that model minority status was going to be lost. Of all the groups that we saw holding hands across America, nobody was talking about the fact that Peter Liang deliberately pulled his gun, deliberately pulled the trigger, lied about the events afterwards, didn't try to get Akai Gurley any help whatsoever. All of that is indisputable. But nobody cared about that. What they cared about was, well, we don't think he's being treated fairly. What does fairly mean? Well, if white cops are able to kill black people, why are you coming down on him? We don't want him being singled out. So I'm wondering if any of the people who are allegedly supporting reparations, I wonder if any of them might have perhaps been supporting Peter Liang. It's a fair question, because it strikes at the very heart of what reparations is about, and that's justice. You cannot be for black reparations, but against black people getting justice when one of us is harmed. You can't do both. This is the reason why you've had so many black people who've just said, you know what, forget it. This whole allies thing, this was a non-starter from the very beginning. Because under white supremacy, there has been a racial pyramid scheme that's been set up, with those classified as white at the top, artificially engineered to be that way, and those classified as black who are held at the bottom, engineered to be that way. And these other groups who are not classified as black and not classified as white either, Asian, Hispanic, what have you, are somewhere in the middle. Now, they understand that their position happens to have a glass floor under them, but that glass floor constitutes the glass ceiling for black people. Now, of course, white supremacy is not going to allow them the same position in the racial hierarchy as those classified as white, but the problem happens to be a lot of them have noticed that as long as white supremacy remains intact, it has assigned them a position higher than black people. There's a glass floor under them that they will not fall beneath, so long as white supremacy remains standing. It's bad enough when you take a look at places like Latin America. You've already had a couple of people who have kind of whispered that, ooh, there's racism against black people in Mexico. You don't say. But of course, the same also happens to go for Asia. And we're talking about the Middle East as well. That's part of it. Anti-black racism definitely did not start in the Americas, though it was certainly turbocharged by what the Europeans did. They put anti-black racism on steroids. They put it on all kinds of human growth hormone and everything else they got. And as a result, taking the enormous wealth that was created from black people's uncompensated labor, and that we've been robbed the proceeds of which ever since, and having it distributed to everyone except for us, what they've done is they've made a situation where there's buffers between the dominant society and us. And that gives them the ability to say, why, here are these non-white groups here, and they're not doing as badly as black people. They're certainly doing better than black folks, so there can't be any racism. Or if it is, it's not as bad as all that. Whatever it is, it's all black people's fault. Everything is black people's fault. It's just their own personal failing, blah, 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 blah. That's the reason why. Buffer groups are crucial. They are absolutely critical if you're going to have a group that's going to be oppressed and held down for the long term, then you have absolutely got to confuse that group's internal politics. You got to make it where these people are going to be doing things that are not going to get them free. Either they'll be following pork chop preachers who are going to be putting on a song and a dance in church, or telling them about the love of Jesus as the cure-all for everything, or they'll be wasting decades trying to cultivate alliances that simply do not exist. Either one of those actions suits the purposes of white supremacy perfectly, because what it means is you're not actually fighting the enemy. You're not actually shaking up the system. In both cases, you're waiting on the pork chop preacher's much ballyhooed Jesus moment to occur. Or what it is you're doing is you're waiting and waiting as you're getting beaten and killed to see if that alliance ever materializes. So what I'm going to need is for black people to stop doing things that don't work. Every group knows exactly what our struggle is. There have been a large number of people in all of these groups who have contributed to that struggle. They don't need to have some sort of platinum-plated invitation to join the fight. They've all known about it. Our problem happens to be that we have way too many foul weather allies. I didn't say fair weather, I said foul weather allies. 95% of the time, you'll have these people identify themselves as white on their driver's licenses or their job applications and such, the Marco Rubios, the George Zimmermans, the Enrique Tarrios, etc., etc. Or in the case of Amy Chua, you'll be having people who will make a big show of regurgitating white supremacist anti-black talking points every chance they get. But as soon as you get some sort of COVID outbreak or what have you, whenever white supremacy reminds them, okay, we're not going to play along with your model minority or your I identify as white shtick that you're doing. We're not going to be doing that. As soon as white supremacy brings them in for some abuse, then all of a sudden, we're all in this together. All of a sudden, we're all people of color. All of a sudden, wow, racism does exist. Well, racism for them exists just for a moment. They're trying to get white supremacy to call off the dogs. And the moment that they think they've got themselves a bit of a breather, or whenever the white media puts out some headline about some black person or black cause that people think it's okay to beat up on, then it's right back to status quo ante. So that's the problem with all of this alliance building that black folks have been spending all this time trying to do. And that's why you have the incompetent operative class who are still sitting here at this late date cheerleading for it. They're acting and talking as if someone's stopping these other groups from joining with us, when the truth of the matter is we've had an open invitation for 150 years to them. And there have been very, very, very few takers. And while you will have the occasional Grace Lee Boggs, the truth of the matter is, for the few people who even know about her, she's mostly known among white scholars, and you got a few black civil rights historians, that crowd of people. But she's not an icon or a hero among Asian Americans. She's considered to be this Asian woman who married a black man and apparently went to one too many cookouts or something. That's basically the way that she's regarded. She was largely outcast from the Asian American community. So if people want to have some sort of discourse or conversation about alliances, fine, but we're not the reason that the alliances haven't happened. We're not the reason that this great cross-racial alliance hasn't occurred yet. Anti-black racism has been monetized. It's become the greatest single dynamo of economics in the history of mankind. And a lot of people have been eating off of it. A lot of people have been eating good. But the dirty little secret is that a lot of those people who have been eating good off of anti-black racism haven't even been white. See, that's the part of the story that doesn't get told. Everyone has no problem finding us when they want to signal boost their own agenda. But when it comes to us, all of a sudden, they're MIA. They can't be found. Or they're giving us some line of rhetoric that it's really about how we need to wait or why such and such person or group's racism isn't really racist. It just never stops. So that's why we're not holding our breath for any alliances. And it's dangerous for people to be trying to sweet talk us into doing that at this point. Time is our enemy. It's against us. We don't have forever to topple white supremacy and the sick system of anti-black racism that it created. We're being economically strangled right now, and we're being attacked socially, politically, and every other way. We only have time to make the right move, and that move isn't going to be waiting, and it's not holding out for any allies to show up. Our voice is strong enough on its own to be heard. That's the part of the story that nobody gets to hear, but it's the part that you need to hear and internalize. We don't need anyone else to amplify what we say. We are sufficient. Everyone already watches what we do as it is. They watch us because they're terrified that any move that we make that destabilizes the racial hierarchy is going to bring everybody else down. So they're all watching us already. They're just waiting to see when we're going to realize the power that we've always had. They haven't been pitching in to help us up until this point, so whatever gains or changes that have been made, it was the result of our efforts and our efforts alone. It's only when we stop to try to pick up some allies that things go left. We lose momentum, we lose focus. Because we're trying to accommodate all of these allies who have all these wonderful suggestions about what we need to do because apparently they understand anti-black racism better than we do. Is that it? Because listening to them, that's exactly what it is. The beneficiaries of anti-black racism are not going to be of any help to the victims of anti-black racism. We're all waiting to see what the outrage is going to be from any of these would-be allies after the Kim Potter sentencing travesty. I'm wondering if any of these groups who are so eager to support reparations are also going to demand that Regina Chu be thrown out of office and disbarred. Will they put their money and their mouths behind it? Will they put their voices behind it? Will they put their financial resources behind it? Will any of these white allies support ballot initiatives and referendums to make sure that police get mandatory sentencing? That way, no judge is going to be able to do an end run around it. There's a million ways that any of these allies could be of help, and yet the very things that I've named, that's the kind of stuff that they would look at and go, why so extreme? So, Dr. John Henrik Clarke was right. We have no friends, and that's all right. We're not trying to audition for any friends. Because we figured out a few years back that we got something better than friends. We've got family. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Mouse, Brian Walton, Jeffrey Gray, Ricky Davis, and Lo Have Mercy. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.